Hi everyone watching. It's been a while since I'm walking and talking with Phoenix. Well, really I'm not walking. I'm standing. So standing and talking with Phoenix doesn't really matter what I'm doing. It's just a talk with Phoenix. And this talk is about all the excuses that we invent and that we cling to and sustain the existence of by selectively finding evidence to support it. Excuses for our failures, excuses for our shortcomings, excuses for why, I don't know, maybe we suck at succeeding in achieving our objectives. Maybe we have trouble in relationships with others. Maybe we have trouble leaving the house and interacting with the world at all. Whatever the problem is, or whether it's right now my problem is my cigarette's gone out, and yeah, I took it up again, just a bit on and off at the moment. But that's another story. People come up with all sorts of reasons why they are in the situation they are in today. And when I say people, I'm talking about adults. People from 20, 30 upward in particular. And one of the most popular reasons, well, it's not even a reason, because a reason is to suggest some legitimacy to the idea. Some of the excuses, until proven otherwise, typically revolve around childhood. Maybe one isn't good in relationships because they were abused when they were younger, when they were a child. Maybe they don't thrive in the business world, in the world of other people, in the modern age, because they weren't equipped with the necessary tools. They weren't taught, or they didn't have any good role models when they were children. And that follows, and it has followed for a long time, that belief that it's all this inner child stuff, that stuff happens to you as a child and you carry it within you for the rest of your life, and it shapes who you become. It shapes your fate and where you will wind up. Like, you've got no control over it, and if you do, only so much. The idea is that whatever great damage you suffer, if you suffer it as a kid, people generally are more inclined to attribute their current situations and state of affairs, and state of mind, state of feeling, state of being to those incidences that happened in some remote time frame, right? It's a popular one. This whole inner child is to blame. It's all about healing the toxic guilt, the toxic shame, the wounds of the child. I've been reading this book, and the book is called What You Can Change and What You Cannot, or Can't, The Complete Guide to Successful Self-Improvement. I know, a bit cliche. By Martin E.P. Seligman, PhD in psychology, and he was part of an actual director of a big ass branch of psychology, some institute in Philadelphia, about 25 years ago. And what the book's about is all kinds of things to do with what we can and can't change. So on one side of it, you've got experience and how that conditions us, and the effects that they leave on our psychology, on our mind, can be worked with, can be changed. But it also goes into genetics and certain limitations that are set to some extent, often variable by degrees, but genetics that are set, and it just shapes how we express ourselves, how we think, how we feel, how we come to become who we come to be. And that's what it goes into. And that's where it touched on this idea that, for so long, even now, people attribute where they are now based on shit that happened to them way yonder in the past. When really, there isn't actually that much statistical proof. There hasn't been any properly controlled experiments that provided any data to support this claim, this theory, this idea that is held to so popularly without question. It just makes sense. If you do get abused as a child, or if you don't have role models, or you lack certain tools that others have passed down to them from their parents, then you'll struggle in the future because of that. I mean, it seems intuitive, and people yield to that line of thinking and that line of reasoning and that line of excusing and justifying all the way to the grave. And I think that is the lure of it. I think that's the appeal, that it's so easy to blame where you are now, to blame your shortcomings and your failures, the things you've done wrong to other people, the nasty decisions you've made, maybe not even decisions, just the nasty ways you've behaved. It's easy to attribute it elsewhere instead of taking it upon yourself responsibly and saying, no, you are in control of that. It's your responsibility. You are 100% accountable. It's a lot easier to say, I'm not a cunt. I'm a cunt because my dad was a cunt and he used to drink, I don't know, alcohol all the time and yell at me and treat me like shit. So it's hard for me. I try, but every now and then I just can't help it. It's how I was shaped to be. It's easy to blame who you are and where you're at in life on other people, other situations in the past in your life. And it's a trap a lot of people fall into. Because at the end of the day, people don't like to feel like they're a cunt. They don't want to shoulder the complete blame, not even half of the blame, not let alone a majority of the blame. They don't want to shoulder the responsibility for where they're at unless where they're at is good. And then they're more than happy to take 100% credit where they now claim, with conviction, it is due. But if it's a shortcoming or a failure, no, that's not them. That's because of this, and this. I think we try to avoid looking imperfect, even to ourselves. We avoid staring our flaws in the face for what they really are. And we avoid it at all costs, using any other means to distract, to justify, to excuse. Because it's tough. Change is tough. Especially if we're talking addiction or repetitive behaviors, habits. If you've been a certain way for a long time, only turning left or only turning right, whatever, it's hard to make a turn the other way around on your own volition. It would take concentrated effort, a sustained effort over a period of time. So commitment. Not only do you have to actually stare your problem in the face head on, but then you have to work through it. You have to process what's going on, and that can be challenging and painful and confronting, and it can make you look at yourself in a light that you typically don't like to look at yourself in. Let alone having to, like I said, process it all, really come to terms with it, and then try to push through it to the other side. Because I say this with everything in life, there is no way out of anything except through. It is only through shit that we get out of shit. You can't go around it. You can't go under or above. It's not like, Play School or Sesame Street with a little dinosaur on the rock. Go around. Go under. All this crap. You actually have to go through it. Because the problems that you face now, doesn't matter if you're tied to the past or not, the problems you face now, it's not a rock. It's not this material that you cannot pass through. Most of the time the problems are in your mind. And if they're not in your mind, they're trapped inside you, maybe repressed as a trauma emotionally on that level. But you can still process those emotions. And they've played around with that with various therapies of you reliving traumas, reliving. Freud thought that helps to, if you had a trauma, to relive it in the current moment, but really intensely. And it helps you purge all the banked up emotions and repressed emotions that you had. And it allows you to once again assume the state that you once assumed many years ago, that same state of feeling and thinking, and then work through it from there and try to find a better way of looking at it, a better way to channel your feelings. So instead of it having being a bump in the page that you just left and you kept turning the pages and it's buried now in the middle of the book underneath all these different pages, you actually just iron out the bump and then try and turn the page from there to a better page. So there are ideas of that, of reliving trauma in order to get through it or confronting something in the present, it doesn't matter how old it is, in terms of when it happened, confronting it now, working through it, so many ideas that revolve around that. But the focus of this conversation is mostly on how people do come up with excuses. And I said that, there's not much statistical evidence or controlled experiments to support the idea that your childhood really has strong, significant bearing on your future outcomes in life. According to everything I've read overall, according to my experience, traumas that one suffers in their adulthood, as well as their childhood, can leave lasting impressions and can make a difference. So I'm not discounting that things that happen in childhood can affect and do affect, because surely they do. But the point is, they are not any more worse than the things that happen now. And at the end of the day, same as the problems you have now, if you don't process those emotions and process the thought process, go through it reasonably and make it reach a conclusion, resolve it in your mind. If you don't do that with a current problem or a childhood problem, either way it's going to keep eating at you from the inside out. Either way it will affect you. Alright? And there's actually more statistics to prove that people with depression, or people who are violent, people who are a bit crazy, have some kind of issue, people who are pedophiles or molesters, people who are addicted to stealing, people who get bad grades, people with any attributes, quite often, or more so, most of the time, if not all the time, the major things that defines the person, the major attributes and habits, wasn't necessarily instilled upon them in childhood, but it came as part of the package in their genes. There's no escaping that. So the idea is to get over justifying where you are now based on your childhood traumas, and to accept that maybe, if your father was angry and violent and used to take it out on you, maybe that has made you more inclined to react in a similar way. But what if you weren't raised by that man? Would that mean that you would no longer have those violent tendencies that you used to blame on your father and the way he treated you? According to the statistics, no, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Because it's what's in your genes that defines how you express yourself. And you got to remember, you're half your mum, you're half your dad. Doesn't matter how they taught you, how they raised you right, how they raised you wrong. You will find yourself repeating similar behaviors regardless. Regardless. The nut or the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. And there's this proof for this idea, this line of thinking, which doesn't warrant cheap, excuses anymore. There's a lot of proof for it. There's a test where they had identical twins who were reared apart, away from their biological parents, identical twins, and funny enough, those identical twins had a lot more in common with each other, even though they were reared apart from each other. They had a lot more in common with their parents, the biological ones who they never met, than do, let's say, just your typical brother and sister raised by the same family, but let's say, foster family. Alright? Typically, the children of the foster family don't really exhibit many attributes of the parents that raised them. They still exhibit the attributes of the parents that didn't, the biological parents. So this strongly hints and indicates that there is a greater tie with genes determining our behaviors, genes determining our motivations, our values, our attributes overall, than do the experiences that you keep telling yourself shape you or shaped you in the past. So that's the point of this talk. It's just to no longer excuse where you are now based on irrational, unproven ideas and theories about how your childhood trauma fucks your present up. All you've got really to blame is you and how you're handling your current situation, which may be exactly the same way whether or not you actually experienced those fucked up things in the past. It might still be the exact same way, because it's in you to do those things. It wasn't taught to you, it's in you. You know, there are such a thing, I believe, as sick genes, smart genes, depression genes, whatever, you know. And this doesn't mean that you're doomed. This doesn't mean you're destined for a life of repeating the same mistakes, you know. But the point is, if you want to better yourself, if you want to actually move on from your current problems, your current dilemma, your crisis in life, you got to stop looking to the past and these ideas which aren't actually supported. You got to start looking in the mirror at yourself now. And obviously, the better you know your parents, the better you know your mother, your father, the more you can better look at yourself and understand what you're looking at in the mirror, you know. And that's why it can be confronting living with your mum, living with your dad if you're a boy, living with your mum if you're a girl. Or, you know, either way, it could be confronting living with these people who reflect a half of who you are. I mean, you see all the aspects of yourself that you try to hide from, that you don't want to admit exist, and they keep reminding you. Because you are them, and you are of them, and they made you from themselves, you know. But instead of getting frustrated at all those things that remind you of who you are inside, accept them. Just accept them. You know, if you've got various tendencies because it was bestowed upon you through the line, so be it. Guess what? Doesn't mean you need to act on it. Doesn't mean, you know, there's no such thing as a gene that says you have no control. Unless, unfortunately, you've got some really debilitating handicap which removes all control from you, and that would be very unfortunate. But most of the time, just because we've got a whole lot of crap in our package doesn't mean it defines how we come to be, how we come to choose our outcomes, how we come to act, speak, behave in general. It's still your choice to take the best of what your parents gave you and to minimize the worst. That's within your power to do. You know, blaming shit on the past isn't going to help at all. It's just going to help you disassociate from all the blame, which makes you feel relieved in the short term, but it doesn't remove the problems, because the problems aren't in the past. You know, they just haven't been faced and resolved in the present yet. And that's all you got to do. Face it, resolve it, and it starts with acceptance. It starts with being honest and accepting these limitations, accepting these propensities, these inclinations that you may have. And then once you've accepted that it's all you and no one else, and it's not about the past, it's about where you're at now, then you can realistically approach, okay, where do I go from here? And that's basically it, guys. Try to keep this one short, but still managed to almost scrape the 20-minute mark, so there goes self-improvement for me, huh? I got something to work on. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Feel free to like, share, subscribe to my channel if this helps at all. Otherwise, many blessings to you, fair tidings, and I'll catch you